All right, guys, welcome to Monday night, another Monday night live show. I got my co-host with me, Del Roll, former CIA and Army guy. Del, how you doing?
Jim Dandy.
And of course, we have a great guest on tonight, MP Woodward, Mike Woodward. How you doing, Mike?
Never better, man. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming on, and thanks for sending us a book, Line of Demarcation. Is it out? It's out now, right? Or coming out
No, it
tomorrow?
comes out May 20th, so
May
we're a
20th.
little less than a week away. Yeah.
So how does it feel to do Tom Clancy book number 2?
Feels good. It was a kind of a different exploration in that this book was set in a shorter time frame. Also changed locations to South America, and tried to cultivate a few new characters. So it's been fun, kind of pressing the envelope in the Ryanverse.
I know
That's
Dell's
awesome.
got he's got a question for you about writing in the Ryan verse and in that series. So I'm going to turn it over to him for a second.
No. Well, thank you, mate. I just finished Shadow State, right? And my apologies because if you're an aspiring writer and you're working full time, you never have enough time to read as much as you want. So that's on me. But I really loved it. And one of the things I think that stood out to me, and Jeff and I were talking a little bit before you jumped on about how your experience as a former intelligence professional really, it really shows it. And there's certain details and nuance, and I love that. But also, you having a background in business is also really evident. And so much of the espionage world today does take place in corporate business. So that was really refreshing. But one of the things that really struck me is, and I don't know if most of readers can appreciate this, but how heavy the rucksack must be to enter the fray and write in the Clancy universe. If for no other reason than you have to be cognizant of everything that's happened in this fictional world for the last 40 years. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first it was a great honor to be considered for it, and the editor that controls this at Penguin Random House, he's been doing this for such a long time, going all the way back to the OG Tom Clancy. So to come into this, to be asked to come into this was great. I would say I would answer your question in two ways. One is, given that it's an honor, given it's a legacy, it's also a massive responsibility, and that means getting up on all the past. And I mean, I read most of the past books, but the ones I hadn't, I hurried up and grabbed for. I also know Mark Greaney and Don Bentley fairly well. And when this switch happened, I talked to Andrews and Wilson too. So you sort of just kind of formulate your plan as to how you're going to go about this. But one thing that people might not necessarily expect is, and it's relayed in some of your comments earlier, which I really appreciate, is no matter who the author is, you're going to bring some life experiences that are a little bit different, and you're going to bring some styles that are different. And the editor told me, "Hey, I'm picking this because I like the way you write. I don't want you to try to write like somebody else. So yes, it is the Clancy verse. Thematically, you should be able to, that's sort of a fit for you. But choose your own style. I mean, within limits, right? And so I took that to heart, and I do the best I can with it. And it's really nice to hear you say, Del, that you liked it.
I loved it, and particularly, you talk about bringing new characters into the Clancyverse, and I feel ashamed, but I'm blanking on the name of the Master Chief from the
Kendrick
F Group.
Moore. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
love his arc was just so sublime and just so beautifully done. Got somebody who pushed the envelope, maybe paid for it, and yet by the end of the arc, he has completely found redemption, and that's a powerful story in and of itself. But love that. It was cool to see Vietnam be a place again.
Agreed. It was
You're
great.
seeing espionage taking place. Love that. Love that. It was tremendous.
Yeah, with Shadow with Shadow State, I really wanted to tell kind of a generational story, and that meant paying homage to Vietnam vets, which I've tried to do. There was a major character in there, a businessman who stayed in Vietnam, et cetera. And then generationally, also, John Clark's 70 years old or something, even in fuzzy novel ages, right? And so I liked the idea of him I don't want to say maturing because he's already an older guy, but he's building a team where he's got specialists, and he's been the naval special warfare guy, but now given his age, he sort of needed someone new. And I like the idea of, the was it Without Remorse, I think, where you like learn his backstory a little
Hmm.
bit. And so I wanted him to find another SEAL that had gotten kind of a raw deal, and and so that's where Kendrick Moore came from. And I also wanted to portray how hard it would be for somebody to, pull the pin, and that's what had happened to Kendrick Moore. And so he'd kind of lost meaning and purpose and was spinning out. And so yeah, that story of redemption was something I really wanted to try to tell.
Oh, that was exquisite. Really,
Yeah,
really,
I loved
really
it too.
like.
Oh,
Hey,
thank you.
before I turn it back over to you, Jeff, there was something else that I wanted to point out that, as a retired agency officer, I just love seeing this. Was that when the story starts out, Jack Ryan Jr. is doing what they refer to as like the white operations, right? And I
Hmm.
kind of thought of it more as he's actually living his cover, meaning
Hmm.
that he's actually doing that monotonous day job that gives you, cover for action, or really cover for status to be in that country, to be doing that stuff. And what was really cool about that, and I hope other readers pick up on that, is you so rarely get a chance to see like a character in an espionage novel doing things that intelligence officers actually do every day. And that is doing things like, doing an auditing check because that's your cover for status.
Yeah.
I love it. So thank you. Thank you. Really enjoyed that.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And one of the things about Jack Ryan Jr., again, generationally, this isn't Jack Ryan Sr., this is Jack Ryan Jr. But if you'll recall, the Jack Ryan Sr. Origin story was he was a successful, we called them stockbrokers way back when, right? But he was basically a trader and had made a lot of money before he, went into academia and then the CIA, et cetera. And so I wanted his son to be thinking about, hey, I want to get out there and make my mark and make money. Yes, the shiny ball for him are operations and intelligence operations. No, they're super important to him. But he does want to make money as a private equity investor too. So he's got this sort of inherent conflict about what thing he wants to be doing and which one of those is his real purpose.
No, loved it. Loved it. And Jeff, I'm sorry for like
No, no, go.
bogarting the show, but I will zip it now.
Well, I was gonna say in Line of Demarcation, the new book, there's a lot more of that Jack Ryan Jr. business going on. It's actually kind of the central plot, the whole reason why he's down in South America. Mike, how'd you kind of come up with this plot line and kind of fall into that business line again? And then you kind of throw in the Russian Wagner Group too. How did you orchestrate all that? Because that's South America, the Wagner Group, oil, Coast Guard. How did you kind of formulate that beginning story?
I think I probably have a short list of potential flashpoints and hotspots around the world and particularly ones that haven't been done too much. Um, and in that part of the world, in a country, most people haven't really heard of much, called Guyana, right, which is a neighbor of Venezuela. It's the only English speaking country down there. But I was reading about this oil discovery on the Orinoco Shelf. So the Orinoco River flows out of Venezuela into the Caribbean Sea there, and this oil and gas discovery is like one of the largest in the world, and it's overnight going to take the population of Guyana, which is like less than 1 million people, and there's debates about how they're going to handle that. And as I thought about that and looked into it a little bit further, then you start seeing, okay, ExxonMobil has invested tens of billions of dollars to get this out, and there's a lot of difficulties in doing that ecologically. And then right next to them, Venezuela is claiming it for themselves. And this is a dispute that goes back a couple hundred years in something called the Essequibo region. And like, I mean, as I'm researching this, I remember an alert popped up as The Economist or Wall Street Journal or something, and it was like Venezuela moves tanks into the Essequibo region, and this whole thing. And then extending that a step further, I like the idea. I like the idea that we are in. I don't think of it so much as Cold War 2.0 as I think it is kind of a permanent gray hybrid war that we're in these days. Business intertwines with crime, which also intercrimes with strategic national interests. And so I like the idea that the Russians would notice this, because Guyana being a putative US ally, ExxonMobil building out infrastructure, all of that, that's not going to be good for the supply of the global oil and gas market. Russia wants that supply constrained. Iran wants that supply constrained, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to have that in the Western Hemisphere on top of everything else would be a big deal. So the thought was, hey, you know what? While everybody's asleep at the switch, Russia can pull something off with little green men like they did in the Crimea for something that people aren't paying a lot of attention to. And they have a willing ally right next door, which they don't really have in the Crimea in the form of Venezuela. So that was where the geopolitical plot came from. And then, of course, you have to figure out, boy, how do I boil that down to where it could be a tempest in a teacup where, 12 people from the campus can solve it, and get it and kind of nip it in the bud. And that was the idea.
It's very refreshing to kind of see that business geopolitical plot line in there. And that's what I love about both of your Clancy books so far, is it's got that business back in there of the campus and its other side. It's covered, basically this business side. And I really like that. And it's very timely, because right now we're talking about resources, we're rare earth minerals, our deal with Ukraine, and trying to, it's a lot more than just borders and power. And you wrote something on your blog about it. I think you've had some other things you've done. What do you think about this kind of this mineral and this rare earth, these resource grabs that's going on right now? And Del, feel free to chime in on your thoughts on it too.
Well, geopolitics, even the term and the phrase goes back to geography, and it has to do with the hand a nation is dealt, right? And so you look at the United States, the United States now that it spans a whole continent, and you go, wow, that's really rich in natural resources, and we had timbers for ships, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when it comes to rare earth minerals, yes, there are some that are plentiful in some areas and some not. But actually, I think the term rare earth minerals, and I'm sure there are many in Ukraine that we don't have here. But a lot of the rare earths aren't actually that rare. It's the refining of them that is really super challenging. And something that I researched and wrote about is the iPhone has something like 7 rare earth minerals, all of which we import from China. And we don't import them from China because they're rare. We import them to China because they're the only place that refines them. And part of that is because refining them is an absolute, at least the way China does it, is an ecological disaster. So there's this whole city where that's what China's very big on locating industries in cities. So you'll have this town that's like, hey, they make leather goods in that town, So there's this town where that's what they do. They refine rare earth minerals, and it is poisoned the water and the land, and it's really not something that we want to do here. It's one of those necessary evils that has to get done because the whole world relies on these things. But there was a time when the F-35 radars had these rare earth minerals that were coming from China because we couldn't get them from anywhere else. So it's just a reality of what we deal with. And so I like to bring those geopolitical tension points into writing if I can. And the trick is to not overburden it, and make it too complicated, but make it actionable and humanize it and things like that.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and it's such a big topic right now, and I think we take for granted what is in one of these things. Like you said, there's 7 rare earth minerals in there.
Yep.
In the refining of it and what it's doing to probably the health of the people over there, the environment, and then the fact that we have to have it now because, we have this, we have laptops, we have all this great technology around us, and we underestimate, what it takes to get that. And then, of course, it's kind of the pawn, like you said. We're not necessarily in a Cold War. We're in that gray hybrid now where the pawns in this chess match between the superpowers is not the military, so to speak. I really feel like that's, correct me if I'm wrong or jump in, I feel like that's kind of taken a little bit of a backseat. And it's the gas, it's the oil, it's the minerals, it's the manufacturing. Like, I want to hear both of your thoughts on that being kind of the major pawn now.
Well, I'll go first, Del, and then turn it over to you. I think that what defined the Cold War from 1917 to 1991 were two competing ideologies. And, the capitalist side of things believed in, we want worldwide free trade. That's going to, lift all boats, et cetera. That requires stable democracies and freedom in order to have good trading partners. And so that's Wilsonian democracy and wanting to, make the world safe for it, for capitalism. Almost at the exact same time that happened at the end of World War One, you had Lenin leading the Bolshevik Revolution, who said the exact opposite thing, right? And he said industrialization has led to a concentration of property and wealth and capital in the hands of a few, and that is a function of imperialism. And the United States is the leader of the imperialists. And so then we had this ideological struggle for the next 70, 80 years. But those are very clear black and white ideologies. And what we have now, it's not ideologies. China's communist branding, but they're capitalist in practice, right? There's no Marxist really philosophy there that says, oh no, this is exactly how it should work. They left that behind a long time ago and really turned to capitalism. What we have is more like, to me, classic imperialism, the way it looked sort of in the lead up to World War One, where you have, great powers struggling to say, hey, I want these colonies because I'm going to be mercantilist and hang on to these resources, et cetera. So that's what I see. We talk about the crank, right? China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. There's no guiding philosophy that holds those guys together in an ideology. There is, hey, historic grievances, land grabs, things like wanting to, in China's case, wanting to secure their supply chain or bring Taiwan back, et cetera. Very ad hoc geopolitical goals, not the ideologies that we saw in the Cold War.
No, absolutely, and I totally agree with Mike. I would take it even a step further. I remember early on in my military career, like around the first Gulf War, I remember hearing people protesting about no blood for oil. And unfortunately, that is a very simplistic view of the world, because really, oil is a national security issue. And unless you want to be paying $12 for a gallon of milk, you need to ensure that you have ready access to fuel. But if you even take it a step further, there's a great book by Max Booth. I want to say it was published maybe about 20 years ago. Called The Savage Wars of Peace. And what's relevant about it is it covers all of these small engagements that we have been a part of through our nation's history. And if you look at them, you come to realize that there has never been, or there has rarely been, a delineation between military and national aspirations and the business world. Why was the Barbary Coast a thing? It was because pirates were raiding business, vessels that were moving through. Why did we go into China during the Boxer Rebellion? Because it was because of, business reasons. Why was Cuba such a issue for so long, and it boils down to the trade routes.
Hmm.
There has always been an intermingling of business with national security objectives. It's always been there. There was a period of time during the Cold War where we kind of had the luxury of ideologies that opposed each other, but it's always been there. And it's this: we have stripped away the mask of ideology, and now we are dealing with the cold, hard, brutal tapestry that is warfare and business and economics, and all of that is woven together. And that's just the way, frankly, it's always been. So I totally agree with what Mike had to say.
Yeah, and I hope we get a chance to talk about my next two books, which are both up for pre-sale. But the second one, Red
There you go,
Tide,
Mike. Plug it.
that is the theme. I don't mean to play, but that
No, go
really
ahead.
that really is the theme. The commerce floats on the world's oceans, and once those are fully interrupted, he who controls them controls commerce, and once you control that, you control lots of things. And so that intertwining of the commercial world with the military world, I agree, they're intricately wedded.
Yeah, there's a great segue, Mike, right into your next two books this fall, because Terminal Velocity, your third Tom Clancy book, comes out in September, and then Red Tide, a novel of the coming Pacific War, is going to be this fall. So yeah, let's jump right into both of those, starting off with Terminal Velocity.
Well, so I was on terminal velocity. We were talking earlier, like, hey, how did you end up in Latin America for line demarcation? And I talked about that with terminal velocity. I was like, no one's really written about Kashmir in India, Pakistan in a while, and so I invented this scenario where the Pakistanis back a terror group, and they basically create mayhem in Kashmir, and we're very worried because two nuclear powers and stuff. And then you're like, I'm watching the news last a week or two ago, like, this son of a bitch, right? And every one of these books, you're kind of like, may it please remain a work of fiction. But that's what Terminal Velocity is all about. It's about the India Pakistan reference, and our complicated and long relationship in a way with both countries, but especially with Pakistan, because they were I don't know if I'd necessarily call them a stalwart ally, but they were at least an ally, and a critical enabler in the war on terror. And so it's sort of like a reverb echo of that. Yet they've shifted their strategic objectives to screwing up India and Kashmir, where there's already been lots of problems. So that's sort of the theme of that book.
I messaged Brad Thor last summer. I've had him on a couple of times, and he seems to have several plot lines that have come true in the news. And I
Yeah.
messaged him, and I was like, "Hey, can you knock it off?" Like,
Yeah, right, right.
they're
Yeah, he's
they're
very
reading your
good at that.
books and then acting it out. You have to stop.
Yes, yeah. He's an agent. There it is.
Which I thought was hilarious, and we joked about it a little bit. But I think that's what's maybe the best part about the military espionage genre in fiction, is that it might not be too far from the truth, especially when you
Hmm.
have guys with former experience in intelligence and different fields within the military. It's not too far potentially from the truth. It kind of begs the question of what does Mike Woodward really know? Is something extra coming out? You putting it in the pages there, and I think that's a great thing about this genre, is that you get to pull some of those things out there and make people blur the lines between fact and fiction.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And one thing about that is that what I've noticed is this information is all out there, open source, laying around. It's a matter of connecting dots and basically having the time to really think about it and read about it. And certainly when I was a busy business executive, I paid less attention to it because I didn't have time, But now working on these kinds of things, you have the time to analyze it.
Yep.
That's hot. No, and I think it's really cool because when you do have that background and that experience, not only in business but your former career as a military intelligence officer, that you understand how these dots can be connected. You have not only an understanding of what's going on in the world today, but a foundational understanding of the history of these regions, how these players engage each other. And it's funny. It's like you were saying that it just came out in the news last week what was going on in India and Pakistan. And I swear, like a month ago, I was like, I haven't heard from India and Pakistan in a while. And
never good. Yeah. That theme around the experiences that we have in bringing things in. I was a naval intelligence officer in the Pacific, and so spent lots of time in Japan and the Philippines, et cetera. Then later in my career, I was a senior executive in a smartphone company, a manufacturing company, HTC, if you remember them, Android phones. And they were Taiwanese, and so I went to Taiwan quite a lot. And then as I continued on in my tech career, chips are just part of something you do. So in this book, Red Tide, I really wanted to write about. I felt like most people don't understand that there's a difference between chip design, which is the whole industry, Silicon Valley, and that's all these, the household name companies. Nvidia, they design chips. They do not
Mhm.
manufacture them, right? Those come out of a foundry that costs, tens of billions of dollars in specialization, and 70% of that comes out of Taiwan, out of TSMC, including all of those Nvidia chips. And so I wanted to write about this scenario where it was really a naval war, where China didn't just invade one day, right? Because we see what that looks like. In China, it's a bit of a mutually assured destruction thing with trade with China. They're very dependent on the export economy. They're kind of dependent on the US, right, to feed that export economy. So to just wake up one day and do that would be very difficult for them. And so what I wanted to envision was like the US sort of goads them into a difficult position through embargoes and trade wars on these chips, which they need too, right? I mean, TSMC also supplies China. And
Mhm.
one day they look out at the Navy and they go, we think it's a paper tiger. We think that if we, put a whole bunch of Type 55 destroyers all around that island, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. And we're going to call it, the three C's, and sort of extend our sovereignty on the waves. And then as tensions mount, mistakes happen, and it turns into a naval war. But what I like about that plot is that it again involves the commercial world with sort of underhanded tactics, where it is that inseparable line. And the heroes on the American side come to realize, look, if we do not turn around this embargo, like right now they're feeding us chips because they want to, and they've pacified us in that way. We are now completely beholden to them and have to take this back, which I think is a really fun. Well, I don't know, it's fun. It is an interesting scenario to explore, and I think one that could really happen.
Oh, oh yeah, it definitely could on multiple levels. I mean, if you get into a situation like exactly what you were saying, you get into a situation where the tensions are rising, and it's one little mistake, and that
Yep.
could be literally down at the platoon level, for lack of a better analogy.
Yep.
Obviously, I don't know a whole lot about the Navy. Um, Jack Stewart reminds me of this on a regular basis. But but if you stop and you think about it, like what is that P3 Orion that was
Mhm.
ended up coming down in Chinese territory? This is like
Yeah.
what 2000?
2001. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was like just before 9/11.
Boy, it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it was that long ago.
That was
I,
like the Bush administration. George W. is like his first big crisis. I remember that.
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
but think about it. Something like that could have quickly gotten completely out of control. So yeah, your premise is absolutely plausible, and I look forward to checking it out. And the over reliance on technology, it's not over reliance; it just is what it is, and we don't have all the cards. Lots of people have different cards, and we're all dependent on each other, and that's where it is.
Well, and on the China thing, what is intriguing to me is that if you pushed things a certain way to where you were to back them into a corner, they could look at it and say, all right, the US is rebuilding its Navy. How long is that going to take? I mean, you've got to start with like the shipyards, right? That's going to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
decades. And then you go, all right, the U.S. has recognized their reliance on these foundries. So TSMC is building a plant in Arizona. Well, that's going to take years too. And so, if you're Xi Jinping, you could look at this and say, hey, I got this is my window, right? I'm 70 something years old. I'm not going to be here forever. The trick will be to do a little sleight of hand, so it's a fait accompli, and just like, hey, nope, not an invasion. We're just securing our resources, or whatever it is, and that's what I read
Mm-hmm.
about in the book. But to me, that there it is plausible that there is this window of time where it makes sense for them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because you're right, he is getting older. They're in the position because of the one-child policy where their population is actually declining. You've got that portion of the population that is what we refer to as fighting age. There's less and less of them. There's more and more older Chinese because of certain nuances of their culture. You've got less and less people to take care of a larger and larger group of people. There is a certain window where if he was going to do something, he would need to do it within that window. And you're right. It could be something that just spins out of control. That's not planned.
Yeah. Well, let's hope not.
Yeah, right.
God, I hope not. No.
Yeah. I read something today about the Chinese changing the law on marriage because of the population thing that you brought up, Del. I can't remember what the headline was, but I read it briefly and I was in between a meeting. But I saw it and I thought, oh, they're addressing something. And I really feel like China is playing like 3-dimensional chess with the rest of the world. Like from having land here in the United States next to our military bases to having an influence in some of the global banks from Europe and even over here to the manufacturing. Like they were into the pork industry at one point in time. Like they are playing 3-dimensional chess on a war board that I think we are just not tracking. I mean, maybe we are in the bowels of the Pentagon. Somebody's got this figured out. But in the public eye, it certainly looks like every time they move a piece on the chessboard, it's for a strategic reason, whether it's for their advantage or it's to kind of poke at the bear a little bit. Like, because again, we go back to the mistake thing. All hell could break out in the Pacific and the South China Sea over something simple. And we've had our planes flying in international waters and they've said, nope, this is not international. What are you doing? Same thing with the boats, and ships. And it could be that little disagreement and the wrong guy who's a little trigger happy on the other side of the radio. And then what happens?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's like we have three guys and are all like trying to start a thought. What I would be interested in hearing, Mike, is your opinion on. It's been in the news the last 12 hours. This whole Dubai is going to gift us a new Air Force One.
I think it's Qatar, wasn't it?
Was it Qatar? You're right. It was the Qatar.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't like it. I think it's a bad idea to accept it, and I think that every government and business has rules for executive. When I was a senior executive with AT&T, and I was in charge of buying phones, and we would visit Korea and everywhere else, and well, of course, those guys would have happily given me many lavish gifts, right? Because I would turn around and cut a check to buy 40 million phones a year, and I don't think it's right, and I think it is I think the United States should be above that and able to make its own Air Force One.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think maybe that's a bluff in a way to kind of send a shot across the bow to the American military defense, industry, who has kind of drug their feet and had some historically long delays and problems with almost every single offering that they've had? I mean, this is going back to when Trump was first in office doing the new, Air Force One, and we still don't have it yet. Do you think maybe that's kind of a card he's playing?
Well, why not buy an Airbus then, right? I mean,
Okay.
isn't this plane a 747,
Yeah,
right?
it's supposed to be off
So,
the shelf,
right, Boeing.
retrofitted.
Um, yeah, no, to your point, I think there have been legitimate frustrations with sourcing the next Air Force One and sourcing the was it VMX one? VMX one is the squadron, whatever the helicopter is, right? Marine One.
Oh, yes,
Um,
yes.
and I think we turned to a Brazilian supplier for that one. I think I could be wrong, but anyway, I doubt. I think there's a little more Occam's razor at play here than everybody's talking about 40 dimensional chess. I think that this is, hey, you know what? If you want to curry favor, here's something that you could do, and I think it should be a non-starter personally.
No, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think the most simplistic explanation is probably the truth. I just will note that beyond constitutional issues, political issues, ethics issues, hey, the Greeks gave a really expensive gift to the Trojans at one point. Didn't go well.
Right.
And I'll just leave it.
But it looked great. Yeah, it was very very cool. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's a good looking airplane too. I mean,
it's a good looking airplane.
it's a great looking airplane. It's beautiful on the inside. I mean, it's a great gift, but we're a long way from it being, legal and acceptable, let alone retrofitted to carry around the president of the United States for probably at least the next 4 years, I would imagine, until we get the next generation of Air Force One. But it's kind of one of those things where I kind of just want to think that maybe it's just a card he's playing.
Trolling. Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
the leaving. Sorry, let me give you one thing. Leaving the ethics and politics out of it. I mean, you have to retrofit that thing with flares and chaff and communication.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to go right back into the defense industry to do all that. And it's not like that's going to be, you're not going to Car Toys for a new stereo. Like that's going to take a while.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would like to think a year, maybe more. Like, it's going to take a minute to get that thing ready. I mean, yeah, it can fly. That's great. But it's security, the comms, everything, like you're saying, Mike. Like, we're a long way from it being a functional
Yeah.
Air Force One that the Pentagon is comfortable with putting into inventory for real. Like, we're a long way away from it. It's kind of, it sounds good on the outside. You go, ooh, they're gifting us a plane. It's a free plane. This is a beautiful plane. It's going to be great, right? We're a long way from it being reality.
Interesting times.
Absolutely. Hey, you guys want to talk about books?
Let's do it.
Questions? You want me to ask questions?
So, all right. Here's a question for you. If you were going to be going to a desert island for the next year, what 3 books would you take with you?
I would take fiction or nonfiction. Any book?
Your choice, Mike.
Well, probably a reference book on the flora and fauna of the island for starters to help with survival.
That is a
No,
really good
God, that is
response.
smart. That's the best
no,
answer to that question ever.
I think the way to think about that, the answer to that question is like, what books have I reread time and again? Some of my favorite books are getting pretty old, but Winds of War and War and Remembrance. If you read those, the Herman Wouk saga, and a lot of people called him the American Tolstoy. And I also loved the Caine Mutiny. Read it a bunch of times. I'm also a big and this is pretty nerdy, but I'm a pretty big Patrick O'Brien fan in
Cool.
the seafaring realm. So I've reread that series of 20 books probably 3 times. So I'd probably pick, you know, K Mutiny, a Patrick O'Brien, and Winds of War. That'd be my answer.
That's awesome. And no shame in rereading books. I had a copy of Prince of Tides, Pat Conroy.
Yeah.
That was my deployment book, and I had it in a plastic bag. And every time I went to the field, went to deploy, whatever, that book came with me. I reread it till the binding gave out.
Nice.
I can't really
Nice.
explain why, but no, I totally get that. Your turn, Jeff. Ask a question.
Yeah, I'm on probably my third iteration of Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I've read it so many
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Same thing, to the point where it's fallen apart and it's traveled with me all this time. It's one of those books that's just kind of classic. All right, Mike, let's do this. If you could solve one unsolved mystery, what would it be and why?
Oh, goodness sakes. Life on other planets. Yeah, I think it's hard to not. I like the stars. I just got back from a trip to the South Pacific. I was in Fiji. It was wonderful, and one of the fun things is seeing the southern stars. And when you're able to take a little time off and sit outside and look up and think about other worlds and how vast the universe is. It is awesome in the way that word was originally meant. So knowing something about what else is out there, and if they've ever been here, that would be interesting to know.
Okay.
Very cool.
Del,
Very
how about
cool.
you?
So, are you a pantser or a plotter?
I am a plotter who pantses in between. So I believe strongly. My process is to start with a list of characters that I write a paragraph about and grab a picture off the web of what I think they should look like and think about them, and like, here's my prime actors, my protagonists and antagonists, and determining for each of them what they want in the story, where they begin in their arc and where they end in their arc. And so once you have all that stuff established, then I go to a narrative outline, which is maybe 5 pages. And then I try to get to a detailed outline, which is always really hard. Your first part's always a lot better than your third part. But I will say that along the way, um, things change, details get, you'll call an audible, details get filled in, you've changed a character a little bit, things like that. But I think all those things make me more of a plotter.
No, that's awesome. You ever find yourself like when you've finally gone through all your preparation work, you worked up your narrative outline, you're going through it, you get midway through Act Two, and you're like, "Wow, this is going a lot faster than I thought it would," and I am not where I am. I need to create another layer to this. I'm
Mhm.
assuming you've experienced that as well.
To a certain extent, I think there's a when one of the reasons I do the outlining is because I think pacing is really hard to get right out of the chute. You're like, I want this to happen, this to happen, this to happen, this to happen. You're like, great, that was 72 hours, right? They barely had 3 meals, and that doesn't make sense. So you have to like kind of create space for other things to happen. And so for me, that question, Del, that's sort of a function of that. As you're creating space, you might go, okay, well, there's other perspectives. This, because I am creating space, I have time to say something else about this villain or this other character who wasn't necessarily a major part of the story, and then finding ways to have that little bit of a subplot connect up to the main plot where it's a driver and becomes important. So yeah, I've done that, but I would say I do it more at the outline level.
Cool. Over to you, Jeff.
So, Mike, you got a busy year this year. Line of Demarcation, Terminal Velocity, and Red Tide. How did you juggle writing 3 books all kind of in a row? And what's the work ethic like and kind of the hustle like for you?
Yeah, yeah, and I have another contract that I can't talk about yet, but the
Hey, awesome.
yeah, I'm working on now. So it has been a super busy year. I work every single day, and that's the nice thing about this. You can do it whenever you want. I'm a morning person, so I kind of start around 5 a.m. and by 2 o'clock, I don't want to do anything. Um, Not that I work 5 to 2 straight through every day, but it's something like that, and I think it's the old, plan your work and work your plan. So I do, I work backwards from a deadline and think, okay, if that's the deadline, I want to be done with the book a month before. And if I want to be done, here's how long I'm going to allocate for, my 3 acts, and go from there. But it has been nonstop, coming up on almost 2 years. It's been very, very aggressive pace.
That's a good thing. Good thing.
Yeah, good thing. Beats the alternative for sure.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to Red Tide because I really want to see really how you peel back the layers of that, and especially the whole Taiwan situation and what could come of that. And very interesting concept that I'm looking forward to. And congratulations on 3 books this year. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's 3 books in 6 months. It starts well. It begins tomorrow and goes through the end of September. Yeah,
Does Red Tide have a release date yet?
yeah, September 16th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Awesome. Awesome. Dale, you got any more questions you want to
I
ask?
do. I do. Okay. So there's a lot of people who will tune in either live stream or they're going to watch this later. And there's some of them who are just fans. They're fans of you personally, Mike. They're fans of Jeff. They love the genre. And there's also a fair number of individuals who aspire to be writers. Well, I mean, they're writers, but they aspire to be authors. You probably know where this question is going. So, like, of every 100 people that say, I'm going to write a book, one actually finishes it. Of, anywhere from 300 to 1,500 people who actually finish a manuscript, maybe one gets published. What advice would you give to a young, aspiring author, or maybe not even young, maybe middle-aged or creeping past that? What would be your advice to somebody who's really passionate about it and wants to pursue this path?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and this gets a little to my background in business, but you're creating you're creating art, yes, but if you want to be, if you want to see your book on a supermarket shelf at checkout, then you're creating a product. You're creating a mass market product, and so you have to get in and do the research and say what's winning out there in the marketplace. What do people want to see? And so you could take a Brad Thor or a Jack Carr, or you could, some that sell really, really well, and say, let me analyze this. What are the elements of this product that are really appealing to our consumers, who are the readers? That's what I did with my first book, is I tried to really think about it that way. And the research is so available because this is what we do now. We stream stories all day long, right? Taylor Sheridan spins a great yarn, and he's not
Yeah.
a novelist, but he's telling a hell of a story. And
Yeah, he is.
and so I think looking at those things, breaking those down, that's a big one. And then there are the biggest single piece of advice I would do is I really believe in the outline. Like, I think that if you're a pantser, you're gonna go down a lot of blind alleys. You're gonna reread everything you wrote, blah 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 blah. It's going to be very, very painful. I think it's better to um, and other people do it other ways, but I think it's better to have this whole book, write the entire thing through, even if it's sections are terrible, right? Because you can go back and do it, but by the time you're done with it, you know your characters, you know the story arcs, you know what's going to happen. So then you can write it, you go through it again. It's just so much better as opposed to, all right, I've almost got chapter 2 nailed. It doesn't matter how many times you try to get chapter 2 right. If by the end of the book, it no longer makes any sense, So I think that's a big one. And the third one that's obvious to me is like, I like to think about, I like to think about novels as being really screenplays first and novels second, if that makes sense. In other words, if you can drive a story that is visual and edited like a screenplay with beats and things like that, you can then make it richer into a novel by adding the interior thought and thing. And if you do it that way, you avoid the biggest mistake I think that all first time novelists makes, which is too much narration, too much exposition instead of the story unfolding through, it's the old show don't tell. But people always hear show don't tell, but I'm like, you know what? The way to action will make that actual is to, think about it like a screenplay. So those, I can go all day on this, but those are my top points.
No, that's fantastic because I agree with all of them, and particularly the first one. And I think that's what hangs a lot of people up is they become doggedly focused on I'm creating art. Well, this is a Venn diagram, and business is part of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that way, you're not going to get an agent. You're not going to get a publisher. So, yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Del, any more questions?
One more thing on that, because you mentioned agents. I remember reading, there's a lot of advice out there on getting agents, and it's like, write this outlandish thing because they're seeing boring stuff all day. And it's like, no, you write an outlandish thing, they're going to think you're a kook. They're business people, right? You need to make a business proposal. That is what you are trying to do. And I think that's just a function of maturity and remembering where you are in the value chain of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Del, any more questions for Mike before we let him go?
I would like to hold him hostage for a weekend. And just you don't have time for that. It's patently illegal, and I enjoy my freedom.
Well, Mike, thanks for coming on and doing this. Appreciate you.
Oh man, my pleasure. I could job on with you guys for another couple hours. Super fun.
Yeah. So before we let you go, where can people go to find more about you, catch up on the blog, and be in the news on the releases this year?
Yeah, mpwoodward.com is everything. Of course, I'm on social. X is mpw author, and I'm on the usual places. Facebook mp_Woodward.
Mike, thanks again. Everybody needs to go pick up the books this year. There's 3 books, and Mike's got a lot more stuff coming in the pipe. Del, thanks again for hosting with me, brother. Appreciate you. We'll jump offline, guys, and chat for a few more minutes before we call it a night. But thanks for joining in.
Thanks, Jeff and Del.